There is this idea that Africans, when they were conquered by Europeans, didn't put up a fight, and because they had spears or swords or whatever small items, they stood no chance against the Europeans. This is a lie. The Europeans had no interest in fully conquering the Africans. Instead, they would force them to be in alliances or join forces with them or leave when told to in order to get good favor with the locals. This was how they dealt with most of the African civilizations they ran into until the 1800s, when people decided that they were tired of bending to the rules of the Africans. A good example of this is the Kingdom of Congo. The Kingdom of Congo had hundreds and thousands of people in their army. In the beginning, they had local weapons, which were no joke. There were people armed with bow and arrows and swords and stuff like that, and even fire sometimes. But when the Europeans first came, they were so small in number that they had to impress these people somehow, so they offered them muskets. And when the Congolese noticed what the muskets could do, they ordered more in exchange for stuff that the Portuguese wanted. This is the difference between the real history of Congo and the fake history. The fake history is to imagine that these people didn't buy muskets and they never went to war with these muskets, but instead they did. They utilized modern technology like every other person, like the Japanese did, like the Iroquois nations did when they got their hands on them. So, if this is true, then what was the five killer apps of Europe if they just handed some of their power away? Well, let us see. According to Neil Ferguson, the guy who believes that the Westerners defeated the Resterners, as he puts it, according to these six killer apps: competition, science, property, modern medicine, consumerism, and work ethic. Now, some of these are more obvious than others that they are not Western values, and they were there in large numbers in other civilizations. But we shall go through them one by one. Probably the first one I want to start with is competition. But before we start, I want to talk about this list in general. You know you're in trouble when you try to boil down a civilization and its history down to six different items. This is a sign of a mind that is forcing organization in a disorganized universe. There is nothing that you can just boil down to six things. You can't even boil down your own intentions in six different categories. Instead, you are a multitude, a universe within a being, with a mind, dreams, a heart, a body, eyes, the ability to see the past and the future, family, friends, loneliness, occupation, dissatisfaction, disunity, and a lot more. Now, if that's the craziness of an individual, imagine how complex a civilization's thriving ability is. And you shall see, as I will show you, that it was not obvious even when the Europeans had all of these things, and they always have, just like almost every other place in the world, that they would win. It was not obvious that they would take victory over their Westerner people. The documentary goes into two things when it comes to competition. The first thing they talk about is the competition of items and sales and the trade in the Kingdom of Congo was no joke and nothing to play with. And so it was written by Portuguese merchants who ended up there. Duarte Pechache, I don't know how to say that, Pereira. In this Kingdom of Congo, they make cloths of palm leaf as soft as velvet, some of them embroidered with velvet satin as beautiful as any made in Italy. This is the only country in the whole of Guinea where they know how to make these cloths. This trade network would make this place rich, and even the cloths would be used sometimes as trade, like money, although they had their own form of money, which was the cowrie shell that I showed. They were tons of gold. And not only were they good at trading, they traded with the Portuguese, and the Portuguese were thoroughly and happily surprised that the people of the Kingdom of Congo were just as civilized as their own people in terms of wanting trade and civilization. Far from a civilization trapped in time, these Congolese, Kingdom of Congolese men decided to embrace a lot of European technologies, and even some of their elites were taken to the Vatican and came back as Christians. The second way in which they interpret this competition is war. And I don't have to be the one to tell you that war is just what people did back in the past. These Congolese, this one kingdom, would have fights with people like the Bangala, the Kingdom of Angola, the kingdoms to the west in Western Africa. Though trading with a lot of these, and sometimes in good favor with a lot of these, they fought many battles with hundreds and thousands of army men, and they wanted to expand their territories well into their continents. And not to mention that they had ships and had traveled to other continents. This is not a civilization that was afraid of competition. This is a civilization that was obsessed with competition. And when the Portuguese came, war continued. I mean, listen to this statement. He then collected a great force, and came armed against his brother, bringing with him the greater part of his subjects, to the number of nearly 200,000 men. King Dom Afonso awaited him in the royal city, with the few who were friendly to him, supported by the good old men. Prince of Sogno, who was with him by reason of the holy religion of Christ, and of the allegiance he owed, he having made a list of friends ready to defend the place, found the number did not exceed 10,000 men, amongst whom were about 100 Christians of the country, besides a few Portuguese who happened to be there. These people were but little prepared for such an encounter, and not being resolute, proved doubtful and timid on the account of the great army Pongo brought with him. Not impressed? How about this early encounter with the Portuguese going against the Kingdom of Angola? They fought against each other also in other parts, for as the Portuguese navigated the river Coanzo, they were continually making inroads into the countries subject to the King of Angola. The weapon used by this people are bows fixed spans long, 6 spans long, with string made of bark of trees, and arrows of light wood less than a man's little finger, also 6 spans in length, with iron heads made like a hook, and feathers of a bird on the top. Of these, they carry 6 or 7 in the same hand with the bow and without any quiver. The handle of their daggers resemble that of a knife, and these they carry in the left side of the belt and use with the hand uppermost. In military movements, they use the stratagems of war and its various maneuvers, for when fighting against the Portuguese, it was seen they knew their advantage over the enemy, attacking them at night and during rainy weather when the guns and bombs would not take fire, and divided their forces into several troops. Not your average uncivilized kingdom, is it? But to finish off the trade section, let's talk about the fact that in a book about Congo, you can find the Portuguese writing down how strange it is that every civilization uses a different type of monetary value. Now, the strange thing is that people have been saying that money and the way money was utilized was never used in Africa, and that Africans didn't forget money. Some people didn't said they didn't even count, but here we have it laid out in different ways. In short, the island produces no corn, no vines, but provisions are brought from the parts round about and give in exchange for these lumache. For although in other parts barter is with metal, here it is with lumache, so that from this one can understand how not only in the kingdom of Congo, but in Ethiopia, Africa, and China, and in some parts of India, money is used of a different kind from gold, silver, or copper, on a mixture of these. For in Ethiopia, pepper is the currency. In Timbuktu, which is near the river Niger called Senegal, they use cockle shells. Amongst the Azanagi, porcelet or money, and in the kingdom of Bengal, pigs and metals together form a currency. In China, certain shellfish, also called porcelet, and in other places paper stamped with the king's seal and bark from the mulberry tree take the form of money, so that metal is not the standard for obtaining the value of merchandise in every part of the world, as it is in Europe.